It was pretty clear at the end of 6 that Chris had had enough. He'd been very successful in Britus, and there was an interview in one of the science fiction magazines which said wild horses wouldn't drag him back. And then Rob and I split up.
After the Series 6, when Rob and Doug split up, it did feel like that was it. You know, we wouldn't be doing any more.
We were thinking, what's going to happen now? Is this the end?
I just, it got so that we weren't doing anything else except Red Dwarf. We were doing the novels, we were doing the TV show, we were doing the American version, and in between we were sort of looking over games and all kinds of things, and I just felt like I'd had enough of that. I wanted to do something else.
It was something that Rob had suggested several times throughout our writing career. The first time, I think, was just before we went into the studios to record the very first series of Red Dwarf. And the second time was right about season 4, and then the last and final time was sometime after 6, when we were doing a series for ITV called The 10%ers.
It's the pressure of knowing night after night I've got to go out there and give the performance of my life.
You can do it. I know you can. Go on, Charles, go out there and knock 'em dead.
And an area of low pressure Wall Street down from the north.
Also during that time, I went. The show had won an Emmy Award, and Rob Grant and I flew to New York to receive it from Tony Curtis, which was a great thrill, and I was on a plane with Rob and in a hotel and spent days and days with him. And he wouldn't tell me what it was, Bobby. No.
No one's really explained to me properly what went on there. They were together for so long, you know, since they were like small boys, you know, so the whole thing was slightly weird.
I'm sure people want to know what the reason was, and if anyone ever finds out, give me a ring. I mean, I think basically when Rob felt under pressure, he felt that if he was writing on his own, that pressure would go away. We were actually writing the third Red Dwarf novel, and he just wanted to write on his own. So he suggested that he wrote one chapter and I would write a chapter, and then he would write the next one and I would write. And we tried that for a while, but it didn't work, and then we kind of ran out of time, and we've been commissioned to write a series for Carlton. And Rob then said, okay, well, I think we should write separate episodes, which didn't thrill me, because neither of us had written before, and I felt we were on a bound to produce a really good series.
The first rule of being a good agent is what? Never get caught. Never sleep with a client. Now, it's come to my attention that in your case, this is not true.
Who told you that? It was Tracy Higgs, wasn't it?
No, it was not.
Gemma Smith?
No. It's not important who told me.
Not the Swain sisters, the little minxes. Mary Dixon.
I didn't mean to pry.
You guys said Kennedy was a great pres.
He was. He was also an inveterate womanizer. His affairs were legendary. They never came out when he was alive.
Every man has his weak spot, his Achilles heel.
Kennedy's was just higher up.
Well, you know, as conspiracy theories go, I mean, it's just as valid as all the others.
And also plausible. I actually think it really happened.
I think the crossover between the comedy and the storytelling worked really well in that episode.
If Kennedy hadn't been assassinated, it was quite possible that what happened in the script could have happened. So it wasn't just wacky and crazy and made up.
Michael Shannon, who played Kennedy, was just spooky when he was lit properly, and he had the voice really well, sort of chillingly well. And it's such a poignant voice, I think, for that generation.
You mean assassinate myself?
Yeah, it'll drive the conspiracy nuts crazy, but they'll never figure it out. Yeah, I was talking about having considered, you know, more considered performances, being able to let the performances breathe, not always going for the comedy, you know. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about American sitcoms is that they allow for sad moments in their comedies. It doesn't always have to finish with a massive big laugh, you know.
There was quite an interesting thing when PBS called the Dallas TV station and said, "Have you seen the first Red Dwarf show that's going out?" And they went, "No, we haven't seen it yet." And they said, "Well, you should take a look." And in fact, they had one complaint from their viewers, which was about the cannibal scene, which they thought was offensive.
I suppose one of my biggest memories on that is finding Farnborough Airfield.
We had to find an empty building that looked sort of 50s, 60s, and a space where we could park all the cars and, you know, make it look like an empty street scene, which is actually quite difficult to create anywhere in London, but which is one of the reasons why we did use a lot of locations out at Farnborough.
There's this huge runway, and then down at the bottom where the planes start, not where they end, so it's safe. Where they start, there's all these buildings around the bottom.
We had to do quite a long sort of denouement type shot, four-hander talking together. But I just remember it's a long shot next to an airport at rush hour. And that means tricky.
Vegetarian, single, chain
There's somebody up in the control tower listening on our radios. He hasn't said action yet, hang on. He said action, go!
The actual assassination JFK sequence was done on a test track at Chobham, which is another area which is just vast, that is empty, that we could use to do these, you know, the car actually going past and all the FBI agents running by the side of the car. And, you know, we obviously had a lot of supporting artists.
A lot of characters on that side street, you know, we tried as best as possible to match to the stock footage.
There's a danger of overdoing it, and it just looks like it's stock.
In fact, at one point, Ed wanted to make it all black and white. And to me, it looked like the real footage, and I showed it to a few people, and they went, "God, how have you got the real footage?"
We wanted to make it look authentic, but still keep it within the realms of Red Dwarf. If you go off to stock footage and you're suddenly going, well, I'm not engaged in the story anymore. We're looking for locations, always looking for locations. And that location came up, and it was Cliff Pinnock, I think, was the location manager. He said, "Look, I don't know if it's any good to you, but look at this." And we went, oh.
It was actually the place where they tested the Concorde engines, and it was the most fantastic-looking place, a lethal place to stand in at full pelt.
And that's one of the times when you actually go, OK, let's find something to put in it.
It was basically a great big propeller in a tube, but the propeller must have been 30 or 40 feet high. And you could see the kind of splats of presumably insects or something on the walls of this perfectly round white thing. And it blows wind round itself at, I think, Mach 5, 5,000 miles an hour it can. So you wouldn't last long. There's nothing to hang on to. There's no handles.
And we did have a problem there. I think we used dry ice at one point when there's a scene where the cast are walking towards camera. It wasn't flat, so that with 4 of them walking towards camera, some of them were walking up on a level, and one of them slipped over. I think the cameraman slipped over because the dry ice made it very slippery.
It was quite a sort of eerie place to be, but I think the lighting job on it was brilliant. And again, it just shows what sort of level we were trying to achieve towards those last series.
We suddenly went, God, this is a sitcom. We're doing a BBC sitcom that looks like this. You know? When you saw the footage coming back, you go, my God, that would not shame Ridley Scott with a $10 million budget for the day.
Basically, it was a real top corridor shot, let's be honest. It could have been done in a corridor, but it was fine, thank you very much, and a whacking great wind tunnel.
I've always been a bit of a technical whiz when it comes to these kind of gizmos.
There were some props that were going to be carryover, and the time drive being one of those. We'd obviously seen it destroyed at the end of Series 6 by Rimmer. But the new script, it was obvious that we couldn't just use the same thing. It had to be portable, and it seemed to, you know, fling them back and forth in space as well as time.
I went to a convention, a Red Dwarf convention, and I thought, I'm going to be God here. Everyone's going to adore me. And I arrived at the convention, and a man came up to me and said, the time drive can take you from one time to another, but you cannot move location. I said, yeah, but the time drive is broken. Crichton didn't know how to operate it properly. You broke the rules of the time drive. It completely ruined my enjoyment of the series, and I've never watched Red Dwarf again. And that was the first thing that somebody said as I walked into the convention. And I thought, but we made the time drive up. It's just a lump of plastic. Hello? Hello? Bastard.
Stoke me a clipper. I'll be back for Christmas.
We thought that, you know, if Chris is going to go, let him go in the way he likes it best, as Ace.
I wanted to do an Ace Rimmer episode as the final one for Chris, and I wanted to do a big, huge, hero-like opening sequence.
That was as good a way to leave the show as any, really. It was very poignant, lots of sort of as emotional, I suppose, you get in Red Dwarf.
In a way, it could be one of the writers, couldn't it? It's, you know, your buddy. Me and Chris, by this time, were friends, you know. I mean, we'd not been great mates through some of the early series and all that, but we'd all sort of grown up then. And so I was quite sad, you know, seeing him go.
Stoke Me a Clipper went through so many variations on script that we simply didn't know what we were building from one day to the next. And the big opening sequence, jumping out of a bomber on the back of a crocodile, we had started work on Ace Rimmer fighting simulants, jumping out of a battle cruiser on the back of an alien. And then it's, oh no, everything changed. So again, another process where we'd started work, everything got pushed to one side, and quickly we need a crocodile.
Scripts were given to their department, and for whatever reason they weren't handed around to the people who worked in that department. Don't know why, but they weren't, and so they weren't aware of changes.
A lot of it came from me and Doug and Ed sitting in a room together, and whenever you get three sexy, virile, middle-aged men in a room together, they end up talking about James Bond. And we always did that. No matter what storyline we were meeting about, we ended up talking about James Bond. And so the idea came up that we'll make the opening like a James Bond come Indiana Jones film opening.
And whilst we were filming that, the Queen actually came and landed. Well, she didn't land the plane, but she came and landed at Northolt, and she must have thought it was quite bizarre seeing all these strange World War II people, Nazis running around.
It was, you know, authentic-looking German Nazi uniforms. But I mean, that's the mad thing about Dwarf. You never know, you know, what you're going to be asked for.
I think Ed chucked in the idea of, body surfing the crocodile.
I think it was Paul Alexander who said, you can't do that. And I said, yes, you can. A crocodile could catch a thermal. Of course it could.
It just so happened that there was a crocodile mould in the department. So we were able to get a large, life-size, relatively realistic foam rubber crocodile out of the moulds.
And I remember being on location when we were shooting the crocodile and just looking in the van, and it was sort of like, that's a crocodile, that's a really, really bad plastic crocodile. We won't be using that then, obviously, that's not our crocodile, is it? Looking around for another really good animatronic crocodile that looks like a crocodile. No, that's the crocodile we'll be using then.
I think Ed and Doug both thought it looked like a big rubber crocodile and was a bit expressionless and lifeless. But crocodiles don't actually have a lot of expression. So we ended up going back in and building in things like lips curling. Crocodiles don't have lips.
And it's a shame because it made that whole opening sequence, like, so cheesy. So unbelievably cheesy. And I guess on Red Dwarf sometimes you're covered in that sense. Sometimes when we just do stuff that's really, really bad, people think it's a brilliant parody. And we're taking the mickey out of, you know, whatever, when it's just bad.
It's one of those things you have to try and make it live as you're struggling with it, you know, because it was just a piece of latex. And it's got to be, you know, getting the better of me. It brought puppeteering to a new level, frankly.
That's Doug again at his best. We were recceing for the German sequence with Ace Rimmer, and he phoned me up. He said, I think we need something else, and I've had this idea. And it comes straight out of left field. But, you know, as you listen to it, you think, yeah, man, that's a fantastic idea.
The medieval sequence was the bane of my life. It took us a very long time to actually source a company who actually, you know, do jousting, medieval jousting, as a hobby.
They were real. They weren't extras. They were actual real people from the medieval period. They spend the rest of their time in a gallery in Holland in a Peter Bruegel painting.
They really made an effort. I mean, they do sort of really get into it. Some of it, the period details, not quite, but then we weren't making a documentary. It was...
That was a weird day of filming where it rained and rained and rained and rained, and it rained all day. It's unusual in Britain for it to rain all day, but it rained all day.
I got up in a sunny place, and I got in a sunny car, and it was bright sunshine. I had my dark glasses on, and you drove out in the beautiful sunny countryside, and it was clear sky in the summer. And then, as we arrived at the field where we were filming and drove onto the field, and there was all the people there and the buses, there was this cloud. Literally, you could see it. It was like the spaceship in Independence Day. It was just hanging over, and it bucketed down rain just on us. And you could look in any direction, and you'd see cows in sunny fields and children having picnics. It was so cruel.
Towards the end of the shoot, I remember looking at Robert sitting on a horse. I said, "You all right?" And he went, I don't think I can really go on much longer. I said, "What do you mean?" And he pressed his face, and water came out of his eyes and his ears, his nose and his mouth, like that.
Chainmail and water, don't go. Especially when it's not real chainmail. It's just bits of mop, right, which are extra absorbent, which have been sort of knitted together and sprayed silver.
And the donkey ran off and wouldn't be caught. We couldn't get out of the field. The wardrobe vehicle was so heavy and it had got so bogged down in mud, we were actually pushing the vehicles out of a field to get out.
And I swear that cloud moved back over West London with Ed. It just followed him. This bloke who was all sort of like, all dripping. Just remember him in his wet anorak, which wasn't waterproof. Look, it's all gone through. I'm soaked. He was so depressed.
Yes, we had to reshoot with Brian Cox because it was so windy and wet that the canopy had water leaking down it. You know, it's not very King-like to have a stream of water splatting down all over the place, and it was very windy, you couldn't hear properly. So we had to reshoot his sequences, in a car park in Shepperton.
Where I believe Howard Burden, our costume designer, did a little double for him.
Yeah, I look great.
All those rimmers, they all did it. They all became ace and passed on their flame. Are you really going to be the one to break the chain?
I think the original script finished just with the funeral, and I think it was pretty much Doug's idea that it would they'd shoot out Ace's coffin, and it would go into all these other coffins, and then you pull back and you see it with the rings of the planet. It was just fantastic.
There's a whole end sequence which is one of the reasons really why I want to do films when the Rimmer's pod joins the Saturnian ring. And, in a movie version, that would have just been, terrific, breathtaking. But with the budgets that we get and blah, blah, people are going, oh, look at that little CGI pod clinking about. And it takes away from the moment, which is a shame.
We're scoring the music for it with Howard. And he did this amazing piece of orchestral, moving, climactic moments with changing chords on string tones, which were, incredibly difficult bits of orchestral work. And it was very, very moving, all this stuff with the music. And I remember Doug and I looking at each other going, Christ, I hope we can match that. I mean, that was sort of how that worked.
With us going round and round in time, the human race can never become extinct. We're like a kind of holding pan.
I was actually just sitting around the office one day, and there was a picture of this, little black baby. Black being the operative word, meaning very dark. I goes, who's this? I said, oh, that's the baby that's going to be playing Lister. I said, but Lister's about 15 hues lighter than this. This is like, Gary Wilmot being played by Sidney Poitier. Right, so I said, and he hasn't got the fat cheeks. I said, my brother's baby looks more like Lister than this guy. So I brought a picture of my brother's baby in with the fat cheeks, And he did look more like Lister than old young Sydney.
And they whine more than Danny. Stopping that kid crying was just, thanks, Dan.
Any note?
Then again, it was crying because we were sticking the dreadlocks on with drawing pins, you know, which is, you can't really do that now.
I just thought the whole snake that eats its tail circle thing was interesting. And the idea of Lister being the father of himself seemed to fit because he was never going to just have, you know, regular parents. I mean, that's not interesting. And that just seemed to work for me. It's not something Rob and I had ever discussed, but it just seemed to fit into the world.
I have to say that Ouroboros was one of those episodes where, from when I read the script until well after we finished shooting it, I had no idea what it was about.
The idea of a parallel universe, or the idea that there's an ongoing existence which is running happily at the same time as your own, but you can only link to it occasionally, was the most alluring, to get her from another dimension, basically.
It is real science. David Deutsch, it's well documented that there is, you know, alternative dimensions. Every decision that we make creates another dimension. And they all exist in parallel simultaneously. So, I mean, I always found that absolutely fascinating.
It allowed her to have knowledge of all the characters, but at the same time be a stranger.
I remember we did a lot of, you know, visualising, a lot of designs for her. And so it was very much a sort of designed by committee.
And the costume, which was going to be Emma Peel, and it was like, fine, Emma Peel works for me. A new Emma Peel, yeah, that could work.
It was a good costume. I mean, it must have been hellish hot to wear. Luckily, I never wore it, but not in public anyway. It was very shiny. I remember we had a lot of trouble with it on blue screen.
Craig and Dan and I had to stand behind her and do acting, and all we could do was like, you know. So I said, look, I'm going to get it out of the way now. So I just knelt down behind her with her arse there, and I looked at it till I was bored.
She changed the pants, I think, at one point because they weren't comfortable, and the new pants just expanded.
It would swell during the day. It would mould to the shape of your bottom by 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, it was saggy.
And so physically, she didn't feel confident, and she played someone much more uptight than had been written.
You mean I'm stuck here with you? Priscilla, Queen of Deep Space?
Also, there was no reward for her. There was no reward of the audience. And the audience made a huge difference to her on 8 when it was like, whoa, they're laughing at me. Whoa, and she kind of chills out. And we got rid of some of the worst aspects of the uptightness, the costume, the hair, and just the sheer experience of working with the guys, which I have to say she adored from day one.
When I first saw her, I mean, I was quietly sort of anxious for her in a kind of paternalistic, sexist way. The little lady could be a little bit shocked by some of the things we say. Boy, was I wrong.
My thoughts were mainly, what is Red Dwarf going to be like without Rimmer? You know, I just thought, you know, maybe this is just going to fly away and they'll never need Rimmer again.
Miss Kachansky, ma'am, I don't suppose you've read my proposal for a new Space Corps salute?
Rimmer?
Yes, ma'am.
Have sex with someone and that's an order.
Yes, ma'am. Right away.
That was really nerve-wracking. But everybody was friendly. But it did show. And what was with my hair? I looked like Elvis.
A lot of it was done against blue screen, and I remember thinking, how the hell do they know, you know, how they're responding to themselves over the sort of a gap that isn't very far away?
Yeah, there was a lot of left and right business going on, people shaking each other's hands, who were themselves.
Things like eye lines have to be plotted around the studio, so there'd be big crosses taped to cameramen's heads.
The others probably had a total professional understanding of what was going on. But I was like, what? We're in a tube? Or like toothpaste? No. What are we doing? Why is it wobbling?
I mean, they asked me to do this big leap, which for Craig would be a piece of cake. He'd love it all. But suddenly there was a girl on board, you know, a bit of a sissy girl on board too. I'm not doing that. I might hurt myself.
I think it was a cruel initiation. On your first day, you'll be wearing a beautiful log dress and you'll do dancing with a beautiful prince. No, you'll hang by your waist from a very painful wire and we'll shoot a crossbow through your thigh.
Shooting Kachansky through the leg. Now, if you couldn't see the big cushion that's underneath her tight PVC, that would have worked really well.
Whether I was psychic or whether it was just luck, I'd actually taken large format stills of the second Red Dwarf model in its lighting setup before we blew it up.
He then stuck that on a stand in front of camera, upside down. He then put a bit of glass in front of the camera, projected an image of Jupiter onto that, smeared the edge of that with Vaseline to give the glow to the planet, hung the model of the white midget against black upside down and reflected that into the scene via a semi-silvered mirror. So that entire sequence is done in camera, just with very, very old-fashioned 50s movie-making techniques.
Sometimes when we were rehearsing, we would do entire scenes about the crew being hit by the gay ray. You know, Camp Crichton was just like, oh my Lord, I think we're lost, sir. You're lying! I never wrote that in, but I think there was a bit of reflected gay ray on Crichton after Kachansky arrived. I think he became slightly jealous.
Not only has he got all this sort of angst and guilt, now he's got jealousy as well. You know, you broke his program, he can feel emotions. Why is the overriding one jealousy? You know, and you've got all that. And I love them scenes with me and Robert. You know, I think that's just classic writing.
They're right on our tails.
We were able to shoot a very nicely choreographed chase through the icebergs and a crash. And having seen it and knowing that he was back on the set with the same cast effectively the following day, Ed sort of said, oh, well, at the moment where it swings back up, we can shoot a moment where they pull back on the sticks. At the moment they're turning left, the cast can do a turn left. It did. It worked a treat. If only the rest of the season had that level of attention to detail and communication, it would have been great.
Smeg, I've just sneezed out my cap. My cap came out right. And I couldn't be arsed going to the dentist for dental cement. So I put a bit of super glue in it and stuck it back on. Right. Which was okay for a couple of days, but then it started to really hurt. And I've still got a hole there above my gum where it kind of split. And I'd go like that every now and again and squeeze out all this stuff. And then it'd go away for a couple of days and then it'd flip. And I'd go like that again.
I always say to actors, you know, what can you do? Is there anything weird can you do? Can you juggle kangaroos? Can you, can you do a weird thing with your tongue? Is there something weird you can do with your ears or something? Or, can you ice skate? What can you do? And then if they're able to tell you, you can then incorporate that in stories, and it just makes the characters more kind of three-dimensional.
I can remember coming back to my mum one time and saying, he's very good at writing, Doug. You know, he gets everybody spot on, but I really don't think he's got me terribly well. My mum just looked at me going, right, spot on, spot on. I don't know how he did it. The opera game, how did he know? But it's so awful because I watched it afterwards and I thought, God, am I really like that? Yeah, I really like that.
Doug does that with our whole lives. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's why I think some of the stuff, although it's blown up and becomes caricatures of it. I mean, some of the most bizarre things are based on real life events. That's what makes them slightly plausible, and that's what makes them work. You know. I hate this. I really hate this.
It's a favourite episode of mine, and I love what they go through in that thing. And I mean, it was those things of sort of like Lister's vulnerability, Lister being scared and not knowing what to do, and but trying to put on a brave face because there's a gale there, you know.
I think it was one of my favourite episodes. It was very like Marooned. I mean, Marooned was a very, it was a two-hander basically, Marooned with me and Chris, where, you can do dialogue and tell stories and do backstories and, just expand the character and, tell you a bit more about his history and stuff like that.
The relationship between her and Crichton was so tense by that time. He hated her so much by that time. She was so annoyed by him. She was so premenstrual. Those pipes were so awful. You just thought, any minute now, she's going to breaking point.
I'm saying this because I know it's not, you know, a well-liked show. And it's interesting just because how it was perceived. And it was voted one of the all-time best shows by PBS on a viewer pledge drive. When I came in with the script, and this is the one and only time this has ever happened, the cast applauded. When we shot it and we showed it to the audience, the cast reaction was, this is the strongest show in this season.
The duck soup episode was actually a replacement episode for what would have been the cat episode.
It replaced another script which was called Identity Within.
It was going to be the cat has to have sex or he dies.
Again, it being my first series of Red Dwarf, I thought, is Doug mad? How are we going to achieve this? I mean, it had everything in it that you should be able to achieve if you have a really healthy, fat budget, and we didn't.
It was quite epic. In my memory, it's this kind of epic story that would have cost a fortune to shoot.
It had Guelphs, it had an entire African village, it had Catwoman.
And because it was concentrated on Cat, it meant that the other characters were kind of slightly marginalised, I think, and there was a feeling that although it was really, really good, it wasn't quite right for the series.
And the other guys would have been so jealous that we couldn't film it. There would have been a mutiny if the cat would have got that episode, I think.
We needed to do a show that didn't have enormous amounts of complicated design.
Because we'd basically run out of money, it was shot entirely in some ducts, which were in the car park too at Shepperton.
And I think with collusion with Mel, we said, well, look, we can create something here quite cheaply which will give an impression of something much bigger than it really is.
And suddenly there was this thing that we're going to be in this water duct and they were all going to get saturated. So it was we had, you know, budget had been spent, so we were sort of making it up out of sticky back plastic and whatever we had to hand.
It was great to film, really uncomfortable to film, really hot as well, because we were filming in a set that was only that high. It was only sort of hip high. The whole thing was filmed in that, so everyone was in these boxes for hours, and it does get hot, and you're just crawling around on your hands and knees with a rubber head on.
The very last shot, I think, of the entire series was when the water comes rushing through the duct and they get pushed against the bars. And we had to do it in the car park because we weren't allowed to have that much water in the studio. It's not safe.
Fire brigade there with the hose pipe, you know.
James rigged up some very specific fishtails, they're called, which effectively, as they're named, they're a V-shaped outlet normally used for gas, but if you connect water on them, they'll spray water out as well. So these were bolted to the set to give sheets of water, and we literally just fired fire hoses at the cast.
You did have, you know, think that all these guys that are doing their work with you for the last 16 weeks or whatever were just getting rid of their anger. I really hated you on this shoot.
It's one of those special effects things where they were going to pull us along a trolley with a string and there'd be some water squirting at us. Well, they didn't need to pull us along on the trolley because there's 4 fire hoses. Fire hoses are really powerful, and the firemen really, really enjoying it because they didn't get to squirt the hoses as much anymore because not so many things catch fire. They're always cutting people out of cars. So for once, they could get all their hoses out and you could hear the pump start up. They really, and the thing's swelling and they go...
The poor old cast had to be trundled backwards and forwards over the same piece of track while we emptied gallons of water on them.
We just rocketed along that corridor with staggering amounts of water, cold water hitting us. Because I asked them if they could warm it. Can you make the water warm? And they were using sort of 11,000 gallons in 30 seconds. You know, it's kind of difficult to heat it up with a Calagas stove.
I tend to always get put into water in all the things I do. I died in water in Blade. I died in water in Casualty. Yeah, I tend to always get the fishy roles.
So how do you get to be claustrophobic? Are you born that way, or is it because you kind of sissy?
No one knew he had claustrophobia before then. But the story about why he had claustrophobia I thought was hilarious. And that was one take, that was. In the end, he relented. And I heard the box being opened. And I stepped out, bollock naked. right in the middle of the Bootle Players amateur production of The Importance of Being Earnest. Well, they had to dub a little one word in it afterwards. So watch and see what word I dubbed in afterwards.
That worked as a fulcrum to be able to storytell, if you see what I mean, and also for the cat to be very, very funny.
Boy, is it crammed. I tell you, if I was there, you most certainly could not swing me around in here.
I've missed you, man.
And I've missed you too, Listy.
Oh, Arnold, man. Don't ever leave us again.
Possibly, though he wouldn't admit it, speaking professionally, of course, that Craig probably would have missed Chris.
Yeah, that was all made up, that. Oh, Listy. Rimsey.
Yes, kissing Craig Charles. That was something that you got to build yourself up for.
They had a long history, those two men, and they clearly relished that moment. There wasn't any. There was none, because I mean, I think I've been in other situations in stage plays and things where two straight blokes do a kiss, and there's always that kind of jocular afterwards, where they're kind of embarrassed and do that. That didn't happen with Chris and Craig. They were fine. I think they were holding hands for a while afterwards. It was all sort of a bit gooey.
It was one of those things where, dare I say it, the foreplay was more exciting than the actual event. Where have we heard that before?
I don't know if I was looking forward to it. I slightly was looking forward to it. And I slightly was scared of doing that scene as well.
What are you going to get? You're going to get a sort of, you know, ashtray with a little taste of whiskey chucked in with maybe some curry coming along there, you know, all mixed into a whole Craig Charlesian Liverpool-supporting potpourri.
They were incredibly professional about the whole thing and weren't the least bit worried about it and certainly never spoke to me about it.
Mind you, I have to say that the word cut could have come a little sooner. You know, when you've been kissing someone for what seemed like 28 minutes, you know, you think, hang on, I'm sure they've got it by now.
You just got to try and pick the moment in the edit. You pick the moment where the audience are at sort of their highest point and then hard cut.
You know, after a while, you think, oh, stop it! Stop it now!
Hang on, I just realised I described my kiss with Craig as good. I mean, not that good, but it was fine.
I was so tempted to make him do it again.
What's happened to the stabilisers? Never mind the stabilisers. Where's the hair mousse?
When Blue turned up as a script, there's what we thought was a great sequence of Starbug entering the tail of a comet. And Pete came up with the idea of, if we have the Starbug suspended nose up, and we have a rig in the ceiling that can drop salt and ice and debris, camera on its side, we can get these fantastic shots of it swinging in and out of the debris field. But obviously the studio we have in Shepperton is too small. So we went onto the main set. We literally went on to where they were filming the live action sets. And then James went up into the grid and rigged a huge great funnel that would drop vermiculite and dust and salt and cork and just rubbish.
So as you're looking up, you get this stream of particles that comes whizzing towards the camera. We only had to stop filming when the matte box on the camera filled up with salt.
It must be here somewhere. I've been around the planetoid twice.
It was a quarry somewhere near Guildford.
Not the first time we've been to a quarry in Red Dwarf, isn't it? Jesus, we go to quarries all the time. That's the moon.
Now, of course, I'm not a golfer. Even a putting green in pool at the age of, 15 was just an absolute nightmare for me. There you are, on the day, everyone's setting up the camera and sound and getting, leads, working out your shots and things. Ed sort of says, I think you guys should go and practice because we don't want to spend all day waiting for you guys to get a good shot. Yes, good. And I was thinking, well, we seem to be waiting all day for you to get a good shot, so I'll have a little bit of practice. And of course, the first swing that I do, it wasn't quite as bad as that. It was, I'd for some reason launched it to, Hampshire.
It's Rimmer's ball, isn't it? It must have gone right around the planetoid, sir.
You know, everyone's saying, played this before, have we, Chris? And the answer very definitely was no, only the little bit of putting green experience in boring holidays.
But he looks like a golfer, doesn't he? Do you know what I mean? But he's a member of a club, isn't he? So they wouldn't let me in. They'd let me do the greens or something like that.
Come to the take, of course, 4, 5 efforts, was it? And the best we managed to get was me swinging the ball, moving a metre, and me going, oh, you know what, expletive.
Number 58.
Okay.
The jet of flame into Rimmer's face is it's a very old stage technique called Pepper's Ghost.
It's done all with mirrors and reflective glass.
A semi-silvered mirror placed at 45 degrees in front of the camera, so you can still view through it, but you can also reflect images into it, and because of the semi-silvered nature of it, you get like a 50-50 mix.
Welcome to the Rimmer Experience, a place of wonder, excitement, and wonder.
The Rimmerworld experience was referred to as Black Thursday, whatever day it was.
Oh, Black Monday, Black Friday was that, or was it called a Black Wednesday or Black Friday? Oh, God, we were all completely pissed off by then.
Oh, God, Black Wednesday, that was, yeah, that was interesting. We was on a circus ride, which, you know, added to the tension.
You know, occasionally when you're filming, everything goes wrong on a particular day for no particular reason. It just happens.
And there was this scene, and it was just taking ages. It was that thing where we come in through the doors. We kept having to be wheeled back in this truck. So, of course, everybody in this truck was like this. One more time.
You know, all those faces like that, we weren't acting there. We just all given up.
I obviously going through a different thing compared to the rest of the crew and cast. I'm like, this is great, isn't it? Isn't it great? I don't know, Black Wednesday? Yeah, it's blast. Why was it Black Wednesday?
Rimmer had f***ed off, right? And here's this whole thing for him, like, you know what I mean? Sort of like this whole celebration of Rimmer.
I know what to do. You just give me the action and I'll do it. No, I'm kind of like, you know, I'm kind of... Woo! Well done, Rimmer!
You know, he's gone off to greener, greater pastures. And there's us for the millionth day in Shepperton Studios, just like working 12-hour days, getting home really late, and just learning your lines and up again at the crack of dawn to get back in. And by this stage, we'd just had enough.
And there was that awful song, right, with Rimmer doing da 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 da, and like, oh God, it was excruciating.
He's Arnold, Rimmer. Without him, life would be much grimmer. He's handsome, trim, and no one slimmer. He will never need a Zimmer.
Possibly, I think, one of the funniest things I've ever been involved with on set, because it was so ludicrous. The song was funny, Chris was great, and we have these little marching munchkins.
I have to be honest with you, the image was from Crackerjack when I was a kid. The presenters of Crackerjack used to stick their head through a curtain and they'd have a little body underneath like that. And whenever I saw that, I just thought it was really funny.
So I had to mime to Howard Goodall. It would have been nice to have maybe had a go at the song. I mean, I would have obviously put a lot of Rimmer, you know, real sort of me Rimmer into it.
We went out and bought 3 commercially available, what are now termed plushie toys, I believe, but they were little soft toys, and we ripped the heads off them and we stuck a circular collar in the top, absolutely rigid, that would give them a very, very clean matte line to put Chris's head onto. And having got these sort of naked puppets, they were all sent off to Howard, who built fantastic replicas of Rimmer's costume in miniature.
Yeah, great. Loved them.
So I suppose it's a bit of a disappointment that I never got around to seeing it, but maybe they thought they'd have to wait as long for my singing to get any good as they did for my golf.
If Mamet came in here now, I bet you wouldn't even recognise you.
I've evolved.
You bet.
I've become something that's beyond a joke.
Too right, man.
My whole secret plan which I don't think I told Doug or Ed about at all, I think I was keeping it to myself, was that Crichton isn't in the episode. He's got a tiny bit. He's not in there. They have to solve how to get Crichton's head back. They solve it at the end. There's his head. Oh, thank you, sir. End of episode. So what is, it's this. It's not right. Actors are meant to want to be in the whole thing, but I just thought, this is brilliant. I can write myself out. I can have 2 days off, still get paid. Don't tell anyone. And, I don't have to wear the makeup, and I get loads of... And I can watch it as the writer. I sit at the back and go, can you do that line again? Because I think I might change it, That was the dream, I think. That dream died such a death.
We kicked around various ideas with him and came up with the idea of, as it were, Crichton meeting another Crichton.
Which meant there are 2 Crichtons. And we'll have to get someone else to play. Well, no, it's cheaper if we put you in it and you put it in a different colour. Oh, no!
Boy, did he have to work when we shot that. He was all over the place. And, of course, with split screens, and so he had to do all of that stuff.
More Crichtons, more moaning about the mask. Not only now was it like just one costume, it's him in 2 costumes. Now, if he hates wearing the bleeding costume, why does he write himself in as twins in another costume? You're like, rub it, what's going on, kid?
The idea that a robot could have anything that resembled a brother, because they were at the same batch, that tickled me. I think it was subconsciously, from experience of, the good friends I had who were essentially good and intelligent people who really stuffed themselves up with substance abuse, that where you just wanted to get away from them because it wasn't funny anymore, that it wasn't even half good, and it was too late for an individual mate to help them. They needed proper armed professionals, and with doors that locked. It was that kind of, oh God, there's nothing. You can't say, look, I'll tell you what, don't take the rest of that. This is a good idea. Have something to eat, have a bath, and go and see your mum. And get a job, it's not going to happen. They need to be put in the thing. You can't have any more.
To simulants, the greatest droids in the universe. But never trust them.
A chance to work with the great Don Henderson was really good, and he was a really nice bloke as well, But his throat was going then, wasn't it? And he was a pleasure to work with. The Joy, a really nice man and a great actor,
I thought he looked terrific, actually. He was one of my favourite, because he was an eclectic tapestry of just any old bit of stuff, of any monster and any bad guy you've had going.
Sims hates humans, but they don't hate gelfs.
This is nuts.
We look great! What are you talking about?
It automatically makes you just like, what? In a bad, filthy mood. What are you looking at?
But what I did do was cornrow my own hair to fit it underneath the Gelf costume, which wasn't as uncomfortable as everyone says it was.
And I'm dressed like a baboon in a very flammable costume, and I'm standing outside and all the sparks and grips and sitting there smoking bags. Do you mind, please? Flammable.
These strides are too tackle tight, Officer BB. I can barely cruise.
Can't remember quite where the whole notion of the sort of Jane Austen world originally came from, but it was certainly a thing where I'd been to see one too many long dress films, as I call them. I think there was a kind of explosion of historic filmmaking in the mid-90s, and I kind of developed a little bit of a sort of Oxbridge chip on my shoulder. I can't, if I see another woman in a long dress, I'm going to puke.
I felt sorry for him because Doug's he's very pernickety. Is that a word? When you say Robert wrote it, it's so different from the original that Robert wrote.
Going to the Pride and Prejudice lamp, what a brilliant idea. I mean, I got to wear that monstrous wig. What is it with my hair in this way?
We took caricatures, really, and Danny, the cat, was in some very braided, military, big booted thing with a huge, great bouffant. And Lister, he was a sort of cleric.
I was a priest. I didn't even get any of the girls. I was a priest. Danny, the dashing cavalry officer. Here's me with the Bible and chops.
That's life, yeah. It's good. You need to keep those boys in check.
But I think it turned out really well. I mean, the stuff with the tank in Jane Austen territory was lovely. I mean, I really like that.
Just borrow the T-72 from the WW2 game, and then I think we'll have everyone's attention.
I started writing this. I went, oh, well, you know, knowing that we'd rewrite it and it wouldn't be a tank, it would be, you know, a shoulder-mounted bazooka, which was actually a roll of cardboard painted green. That's what it would end up as. And then Doug said, no, we'll get a tank. I was going, no, no, what should we really do? No, Bobby, we're going to get a tank. You go, yes!
It was one of the hottest days in August, and there's Crichton coming out of this tank that we borrowed, I think, from the 007 stage at Leavesden.
That was another of those classic Red Dwarf things where when you hear action, Robert, come out of the tank and look around and say, dinner is served. All right, OK. But you're in a tank which is built for small Russian men, so the actual opening is about that wide. And you're in a costume where your shoulders come out of here. So you go like that. I can't get up. That's the one thing. The second thing is you can't possibly hear action because you're in a T-72 tank, which is a machine for killing people. So inside you can't hear your own brains.
I had a recurring gripe that when we did explosions, we never did them big enough. They always look quite good and not mega.
We were on army property, so apparently you can do what you like on army property. You can blow up whatever you like. And when it came to the explosion, we weren't quite sure how big the explosion was going to be, so we had a couple of cameras sorted out for wider shots and tighter shots.
I said supper is ready.
We've been primed and primed. It's look, you know, there's going to be an explosion, and you know, so just be warned.
But because there were the army lads there, love Red Dwarf, me. Hey, great, lad. Hey, good to meet you, Craig. Hey up, hey up. They were all coming in their Land Rovers and their armoured cars, and they brought with them something like 250 yards of C4 ribbon, which is the stuff you wrap round a bridge, tie it off, put a charge through it, and it blows bridges up.
The army said, you mustn't tell the neighbours. And the production team said, well, why? And they said, because if you tell them you're doing an explosion, we'll have to tell them every time we do an explosion. And the deal is we just don't tell them.
But that explosion, you know, was just unbelievable.
5, 4, 3, 2. This thing happened, and we were right the other side of the lake, and you felt the shockwave hit you. It was colossal.
And I think somebody, I can't remember, maybe Danny, yelped like a girl.
I was watching in the little hut next door to the explosion, which the Radio Times photographer had his lens pressed right up against the glass so he could get a great shot. The blast was so big it pushed the shed back a couple of inches. I think the Radio Times photographer got a shot of his foot, the ceiling, and his own face going, ah!
I don't think people are impressed on the neighbours how loud it was going to be, and apparently they did phone the police and go, what the hell is going on?
But I mean, they weren't that close. We're not talking the house. It was like 500 yards away through the woods. All the windows got blown in. I think there's still some issues about that. But so it was a loud explosion. Craig thought it wasn't that big. I mean, he'd seen bigger on the streets of Liverpool.
Bits of gazebo fly into gardens, through windows, on people sunbathing, who, for some reason, got pissed off and ran out of their houses and chased Cliff Pinnock, who had organised it all, down the road, I think.
David, come on. You got a virus, it's fatal, it happens. Doesn't mean we can't be friends. No touch and dial.
The basic idea of a talking virus was an old monologue idea, because I came from writing the Jesper Carrot shows, and there was a monologue he wanted to do about illness, and so I just came up with the idea of what if an illness could speak? What would it say? And it was to just say, I'm just doing my job. I mean you no harm, but my job is to kill you, and your job is to try and fight me. And so I thought that would be a good unusual villain.
I think there was a discussion we had at one stage about David Cronenberg, who admired viruses. He said that viruses are to be admired because they're so tenacious and they're so they preserve themselves.
It's a really dark idea, and that darkness I think is there in the episode, and I think in a way, the darkness inhibits some of the laughs because there is something really yucky about this sort of this talking virus being in his body, and he's about to die, and they have to amputate things in order to. I mean, it's there's no way to write that as kind of a. It's not Terry and June, is it really?
Funny enough, that was again at Farnborough. They had a lot of areas, engineering areas, that were completely out of use, that meant that we could go in and actually create what we wanted to do. And Mel did a fantastic job, you know, making it look completely snowbound, which, I mean, it really did look freezing cold.
A myriad of ladders, tunnels, pipes, which you bang your head on, which we all did. I wasn't the only one. Everybody that day banged their head on something. It was designed as a head-banging area, I think. I sometimes stop on holiday and look at those and go, good location, because I'm a bit sad.
Hey guys, check this out. There's a woman in there.
But when they actually bring that back to the studio and open it up, we actually had to do it in the studio, and it was a fiberglass case that had been made by Special Effects, and they wanted somebody to be inside it, and unfortunately we asked our runner to do it, and she very willingly obliged, and the poor girl got shut in there while they did their lines and fluffed their lines and redid their lines, and of course when we opened it, the poor girl could hardly breathe.
And a great big hi to all of you out there in Flesh and Bloodland. And tonight, Dave Lister, assisting vending machine sub operative and spice food connoisseur, this is your death.
A lot of the time you think, when you hear voiceovers, that, you know, it's a 7-foot black ex-American footballer. It's actually Gary Martin. Awfully nice white gentleman from the country.
I've been doing cartoons and films for years and years. I've voiced over 2,500 cartoons. I do things like Dennis the Menace.
Well, this guy's like this, he talking like this.
Your action master is here like this. There are 2 words you need to know to be able to do Sean Connery's voice.
Right, darling, did you spill my pint?
And they are sweaty bollocks.
Hey, I'm the sugar puff daddy.
You always put the full stop in the wrong place.
Yeah, feel good.
And suddenly, you will shout for no reason whatsoever. Go.
Oh, I'm out of here. Where's my agent?
And I think sometimes as a voice guy, yes, you need to be subtle, but you must choose danger sometimes, and hopefully with Epideme, I chose a bit of danger.
To have him actually be there to perform live helped a lot.
I was in one of the corridors on the Red Dwarf set with a microphone, a monitor, and I think I had a pair of headphones on so I could hear what they were saying, could see what they were doing. But they really they didn't know what I was going to do, so I probably didn't even need a microphone, because half the time I was so loud they could hear me.
And he could speak so fast. And he was so confident. It was just, I love that. He was really, I'd always blow it after he'd done his lines, and if I had run after him, because I'd be just watching him going, brilliant. Oh, sorry, me. Sorry.
We just used to sit there. Well, I did, and sit there and look at him. It was really good. Can you do the other one?
In the first draft, he was very kind of traditional, sort of Alan Rickman-esque kind of pompous, kind of slightly pompous villain with witty one-liners and stuff like that. And there was at one point there was even talk of getting Patrick Stewart in to do the voice, because, as you know, Patrick Stewart's a fan of the series, and they thought, oh, let's get Patrick Stewart in. He's got a good voice. Let's get him in. And then I think Doug and Ed decided that because the rest of the episode was so dark, that it would be better to make it more overtly comic, the character of Epideme, because what he was doing was so awful that he should have a more. And so we came up with the idea of making him like a game show host.
I wanted the character to be in your face, no holds barred, they hit the ground running, all those cliches that they didn't give them a chance to breathe.
Ask me a hard one.
A hard one?
A hard one.
I also wanted that kind of The Exorcist kind of feel, that kind of Linda Blair. So you had all these other characters come in talking like this, or
yes, goodbye, Humies. This kind of voice.
How does he do it? How does he get it down there? In the Leviathan.
The Leviathan!
And conceptually, it is a good idea. It's got one huge flaw, which I think Ed knew immediately. And the huge flaw is that it's very static. It's kind of radio. Because you've got sort of a twirly thing, which is meant to be your villain. It's a bit like Lord of the Rings. It's you've got a giant eye, and that's your villain. Whereas at least in Lord of the Rings, you've got Christopher Lee and the Orcs as well, sort of doing the villainy. So it was Ed, I think it was Ed that came up with the idea of extending the zombie thing. So that there was some action at the start of the episode.
I've always wanted to shoot a zombie film. I love shots of grisly feet landing and splatting around all over the place, and climbing up inside his bed.
They always do that to me. It's like, how can we make Craig sick today? Hey, Craig, you got a bed scene. Oh, great, but she's dead.
Well, the thing is, if they'd have explained to me that they were going to cover my face in Copydex, I probably would have run a mile. When you spend all that money on, you know, Clarins and Clinique creams for your face and then somebody slaps Copydex on it, it's kind of, you know, that's a bit disconcerting.
Craig was kissing the zombie, and he did a bit. It was in rehearsal, and they were on the floor kissing away, and he went, hey, guys, look at this. And he pulled her teeth out with his teeth and spat them out. It's not very often that I actually can't speak because I'm laughing so much. And when he did that, I just couldn't breathe. He also did it in the show, but it was never as funny as the moment he first did it because I had no idea who was going to do that.
Oh, Jesus! It's all right, money act.
I'm quite sort of a sturdy girl, and of course we all know that the sets are quite unsturdy, aren't they? So I kind of, you know, felt that I was going to go through the back wall every time because we had to do that take a few times.
Oh, come on, rumpy pumpy, Chris, has hit the springs. Not only am I snogging a dead girl, then I get beaten up by a right looker. I mean, what are you trying to say to me?
There was no need for rehearsals. Spot on. Knew what I was doing. Gave it my everything. But at the time, my hair was as long as it could. Well, it was down to my bottom, and it was all backcombed. And I actually couldn't. The makeup lady couldn't get it out of my hair after the filming, and she had to actually get in the shower with me, which was a little disconcerting, and quite cramped.
Can I have some details? Something a little bit more inspiring than can I hack off your limb?
Doug said in the weird arcane continuity of the Red Dwarf universe, there was a thing where Lister was meant to lose his arm. And so that was what we thought, well, this is great because this ties in with established continuity, so they chop Lister's arm off.
It's not enough.
It's a big sequence, and everything's being triggered live. Crichton's using a hand prop with a light in it that needs to tie up with a practical pyro effect on a fake arm that has to be chopped into segments.
I almost love making an audience go, ugh, more than making them laugh. It's just great hearing a whole room full of people go, ugh, and that's what they did when Lister chopped off his arm.
Yeah, I got my arm sawed off, snogged a dead girl, got punched in the face by a looker. Yeah, just an average day at the office for me, that.
Leave it to me, sir. I know how to make contact. Can you hear me, you pesky little critters? We want our ship back, and we want a new arm for Mr. Lister. Are you receiving me?
This was James Hendry's episode. And James Hendry had seen this really good Horizon documentary back just before we were writing it about nanobots. They were just becoming big in sci-fi at the time, nanobots. And James had done something that unheard of to me with research, and he'd actually got a transcript of this Horizon program, and it was really fascinating.
The idea that the tiny little robots could go around and rebuild Red Dwarf, rebuild arms, make a planet, was just... I thought, what the heck? Somebody's making this all up.
I think the original storyline was the nanobots wreak havoc on Starbuck, but by the time it got to the sort of near the end of the series, and we decided to make it the final episode, I think he wasn't available to do the rewrite, and the story had to change a lot in order to incorporate sort of rebuilding Lister's arm and to incorporate the rebuilding Red Dwarf as well. So so I did a pass on it, and Doug did a pass on it, and if you'd been around, you probably would have done a pass on it.
That's right. Pick up the ball. Hand, pick up the ball. Pick up. That's right, sir. Now keep going, sir. Keep that ball.
To be honest with you, it's down to Craig and Robert. You know, you can rehearse it and rehearse and rehearse, and you're going to go, okay, now it's down to you guys.
Yeah, sorry. Is that it? Is that the best it works? Okay. In other words, if I'm ever going to pick up a ball... If I ever want to pick up a ball... In other words, if I ever want to pick up a ball, am I going to have to take the morning off?
And it's him screaming hysterically and Craig just waiting for his moment and then just clouting him. Which I think he did, actually, whack me a couple of times.
Just set yourself up now, Rob, for me a minute. Just...
I'm not going to be in the shot, am
I? Okay.
You know, I could take it. I do all my own stunts. It was also one of those sequences we did do in one go. My experience was that we started out, with this wonderful experience where you only had to learn a few lines and you do that a little bit, but by the end you really wanted to get your teeth into it and do a scene.
We knew that there needed to be this red hued planet with electrical storms and dust storms raging around it.
But the planet itself was the snow planet redressed.
And we were letting off small pyrotechnic charges, which were meant to be the impact points of lightning. And it caused us one slight hiccup when shooting it, in that traditionally we have done the jets out of the base of the Starbug with Freon. And the way that this has been achieved is that the Starbug has held 2 bottles of airbrush propellant, and just before a take you turn on the nozzles, the cans are inverted, and you get these jets of white vapour from the nozzles below the Starbug.
As far as we'd known, airbrush propellant had always been Freon, which is an inert gas. It's not flammable, doesn't do anything, but of course it's a CFC, so it was banned.
And it had been replaced with butane. We knew this, but it hadn't registered, so we crammed the bug with airbrush propellant, turned on the jets, and then set the pyros off, which ignited the butane, and instead of 4 lovely white streams of vapour out of the bottom of the Starbug, we had 4 gouts of flame out of the bottom of the Starbug.
And I thought that looked very dramatic, and suddenly everything got very hot.
The bug gets swung back onto set, drops onto his back, still on fire, in we go with the fire extinguishers.
And I'd lost all the hairs on my arms and a fair bit off my head. But I actually needed a haircut at the time, so it wasn't too bad.
All right, dudes. I think what started my return, my eventual return to Red Dwarf, was a convention in 1993 that I attended as a sort of reporter for Radio 5.
Right, I'm with Rob and Doug, the writers of Red Dwarf now, and what happened to my character, Holly?
Well,
I'm very upset about this. It's gone, I hear.
We wanted to get superior actors in the show by degrees, really, and then that was the first move, getting rid of the worst. Get rid of the deadwood.
I interviewed Rob and Doug, and you know, we had a good laugh, and I think that was the beginning of me coming back there.
Thrilled that he was back, and we had suddenly, you know, a world-class Mona in our midst, something we'd missed.
When I first started doing Red Dwarf, Norman was the only person I knew. And when, you know, so I thought, oh, I'm doing that series with Norman in it. Of course, he wasn't in it.
It was like the end of the series, and there's just this middle of a big studio and doing these lines, and you just come back, you're a stranger. I felt I'm just a stranger. I'm gate crashing the party here. He's back. Kicking bottom or what? It was funny going back, yeah, and being Holly again, yeah, because it was a long time since I'd done it, you know. I'm being serious now. It was a long time.
He's just a funny man and a great presence. I mean, he moans a lot, but he's generally got a point when he moans.
Oh, Terry Fisher. I think he came from Big Bodies Monthly or something.
Yeah, he had a great body, didn't he?
I mean, you just couldn't help but stare and blush. Yeah. God, I've just got a vision of him again.
And action.
He was absolutely extraordinary, because he wasn't that tall, but he was just huge. I mean, his upper arms are the size of... Well, I haven't got any part... There's no part of my body big enough.
You know, these guys go down the gym and they work out and they pump iron and pump iron. You can't pump your head. So they get these massive bodies, don't they, with that tiny little heads on top.
I remember him going around the back and just pumping them up so his veins stood on, and then... I mean...
It looked like rubber. I mean, it didn't look like a real body at all. And, you know, bless him, he had a great sense of humour, and he was quite happy for people to prod him.
You couldn't pinch skin. I had to go. I wouldn't have a go. There was no loose bits on him anywhere. You know, like here. Anybody's got like a bit of wobble somewhere. There was nothing. It was like you go like that, and it was like doing it on marble. It's like, you know, I get a little bit somewhere.
Robert touched him. I didn't touch him. I didn't know we were allowed to. My God, no, it was phenomenal.
Disappointingly, at the end, I didn't quite get that right. His head, if you look, folks, carefully, is slightly off to one side to the body, where I've joined the two together. Should have shot his head on blue screen, then manipulated the background, and then be able to make a perfect match, but I did it on a split screen. My fault, sorry.
I want a poster of that. That's the after. I'm still at the before stage.